The dust from the stagecoach settled around Willow Adams as she stumbled onto the dirt road of Copper Creek, her swollen belly making each movement an exhausting endeavor. It was 1874, and the Arizona Territory showed no mercy to a woman in her condition, especially one without a husband or family to speak of. Willow gripped her small satchel tighter, the worn leather her only link to a life she'd left behind in Boston. 6 months pregnant and completely alone, she had come west on the promise of a teaching position that would provide for her and her unborn child. The letter in her pocket now seemed like a cruel joke. Positions been filled, the schoolhouse director had told her without meeting her eyes. Happened 2 weeks ago, must have been a mix-up in the mail. His gaze had lingered briefly on her protruding belly before he turned away. Now, as the afternoon sun beat down on her bonnet, Willow fought back tears. She had exactly $3.47 to her name, not enough for a return ticket, barely enough for a room and a meal. The boarding house stood at the edge of town, a 2-story wooden structure with peeling white paint. Mrs. Holloway, the pinch-faced proprietor, had looked Willow up and down with unveiled disdain. "We don't take your kind here," she'd said flatly. "There's a place on the edge of town that might accommodate you." That place turned out to be little more than a shack behind the livery stable, smelling of manure and hay. The stable master had taken pity on her, allowing her to sleep in the small room where he sometimes kept extra supplies. "It ain't much," he'd said, his weathered face kind despite his gruff tone, "but it'll keep you dry if it rains." 3 days had passed since her arrival, and Willow's options were dwindling as quickly as her meager funds. She had tried the saloon, hoping for work washing dishes or cleaning, but the owner had laughed in her face. "Got enough troubles without hiring a woman ready to birth at any moment," he'd sneered. The general store needed no help. The laundry already had 2 women working there. The hotel manager had given her the same look of judgment that was becoming all too familiar. Willow sat on a wooden crate behind the stable, her hand resting on her stomach as the baby kicked, seemingly protesting their dire circumstances. Her husband, no, not husband, she reminded herself bitterly, had promised to marry her, to care for her and their child. Instead, when she told him about the baby, he disappeared the next day, leaving nothing but a crushing sense of betrayal. She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. The sound of hoofbeats and raucous laughter pulled her from her momentary respite. Well, what do we have here?" Willow's eyes snapped open to find 3 men on horseback circling her. Their clothes were dusty from the trail, and their eyes held a dangerous gleam that made her blood run cold. "Looks like somebody left a package behind the stable," said the one with a jagged scar running down his cheek. His friends laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in the quiet afternoon. Willow struggled to her feet, one hand protectively covering her belly. "Please, I'm just resting." "Resting, are you?" The second man, tall with a dirty blonde beard, dismounted. "Pretty far along there, ain't you? Where's your man?" "I don't have one," Willow replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Hear that, boys, she don't have a man." The third outlaw, shorter than the others but with a menacing look in his dark eyes, grinned. "Maybe she needs some company." The scarred man laughed. "Ain't nobody want to keep company with a woman big as a house, probably why her man run off." Tears stung Willow's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She backed away slowly, her heart pounding. "Please, I have nothing of value, just leave me be." "Nothing of value?" The bearded man stepped closer, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "I wouldn't say that." The men closed in around her, their intentions clear in their hungry eyes. Willow felt her back hit the stable wall, the rough wood digging into her shoulders. She was trapped, step away from the lady. The voice came from behind the outlaws, deep and commanding. The men turned, and Willow peered around them to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He stood beside a magnificent black stallion, his stance wide and confident. A cowboy hat shadowed his face, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. A leather vest hung open over a once white shirt, and a holstered revolver rested at his hip. "This ain't your business, mister," the scarred outlaw said, his hand inching toward his own weapon. The cowboy stepped forward, and Willow caught her breath. His eyes were the color of a summer storm, gray and intense as they scanned the scene before him. "I'm making it my business," he replied, his voice steady. "Now, you boys have two choices. You can ride out of town peaceful-like, or you can try your luck. Either way, the lady isn't going anywhere with you." The bearded outlaw spat on the ground. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you." A slight smile touched the cowboy's lips. "Those odds work for me." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the scarred outlaw's hand darted to his gun. Before he could clear the holster, the cowboy's revolver was out and aimed steadily at the man's chest. "I wouldn't," he advised quietly. The short outlaw raised his hands. "We were just having some fun, mister. Didn't mean no harm. Fun's over." The cowboy's gaze was steel. "You'll answer to me now if you so much as look at her again. Am I understood?" The outlaws exchanged glances, measuring the threat in the stranger's eyes against their own bravado. After a tense moment, the scarred one nodded. "Come on, boys. This ain't worth dying over." They mounted their horses, the bearded one giving Willow one last ugly look before they rode off in a cloud of dust. The cowboy holstered his weapon and approached her slowly, as if afraid of frightening her. Up close, Willow could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes and the weathered tan of his skin. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Willow shook her head, her knees suddenly weak with relief. She swayed slightly, and in an instant his hand was at her elbow, steadying her. "Thank you," she whispered, finding her voice. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." His eyes softened. "Name's Zachariah Benton. Most folks call me Zach." "Willow Adams," she replied. "I'm new to town." Zach's gaze flickered to her swollen belly, but unlike the others, there was no judgment in his eyes, only concern. "You have somewhere safe to stay, Miss Adams." Willow hesitated, then gestured to the small room behind them. "The stable master lets me sleep here." Zach's jaw tightened. "That's no place for a woman in your condition." He paused, seeming to consider something. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside of town. I've got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe." Alarm bells rang in Willow's mind. She'd learned the hard way not to trust a man's seemingly kind offer. "That's very generous, Mr. Benton, but I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition," Zach assured her. "My sister-in-law stays with me sometimes. The room's just sitting empty otherwise." He must have sensed her hesitation because he added, "There's no strings attached, Miss Adams. You'd be doing me a favor, truth be told. Could use some help around the place if you're willing, just until you get on your feet." Willow studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. All she found was earnestness and an unexpected kindness. "Why would you help me?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. "You don't know me," Zach's expression clouded briefly. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone when you need help the most." He held out his hand. "What do you say?" Willow looked at his offered hand, then back at the shabby room that had been her only refuge. The baby kicked again, reminding her that she wasn't making this decision just for herself. She placed her hand in his. "Thank you, Mr. Benton." "Zach," he corrected with a small smile. "Mr. Benton was my father." He helped her gather her few belongings and lifted her onto his horse with a gentleness that surprised her. Willow held onto the saddle horn as Zach mounted behind her, his arms forming a protective circle around her as he took the reins. As they rode out of town, the setting sun painting the desert landscape in hues of gold and amber, Willow realized this was the first time in months she didn't feel completely alone. Zach's ranch was modest but well-kept, a 1-story wooden house with a wide porch, a barn, and a corral where several horses grazed. The surrounding land stretched toward distant mountains, the vastness of it both intimidating and beautiful. "It's not much," Zach said as he helped her down from the horse, "but it's home." Inside, the house was simply furnished but clean. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, with a worn leather chair and small sofa positioned before it. A table with 4 chairs stood in the kitchen area, and 2 closed doors presumably led to bedrooms. "That one's yours," Zach said, pointing to the door on the right. "Bathroom's out back. There's a pump in the kitchen for water." Willow followed him to the bedroom, which contained a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, and a rocking chair by the window. It was more comfort than she'd had in weeks. "I'll let you get settled," Zach said, placing her satchel on the bed. "I've got some stew warming on the stove if you're hungry." Alone in the room, Willow sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the reassuring movement of her child. "We're safe for now," she whispered. The next morning, Willow woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, she tensed. Then she remembered the Outlaws, the cowboy, his unexpected offer of shelter. She dressed quickly and found Zach in the kitchen, his back to her as he stood at the stove. "Morning," he said without turning, as if he'd sensed her presence. "Hope you're hungry." "You didn't have to cook for me," Willow said, awkwardly taking a seat at the table. Zach shrugged, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before her. "Got to eat anyway." He poured her a cup of coffee, then sat across from her with his own plate. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Willow admitted. "Thank you." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Zach spoke again. "I meant what I said about needing help around here. Nothing strenuous, mind you. Just cooking, maybe some light cleaning if you're up to it. I'll pay you fair." Willow looked up, surprised. "You're offering me a job?" "If you want it, until the baby comes, at least." His gray eyes met hers. "After that, we can figure something else out." The kindness of this virtual stranger threatened to undo her carefully maintained composure. "Why are you doing this, really?" Zach set down his fork, his expression serious. "My brother's wife was in a situation similar to yours. No husband, baby on the way. Town turned its back on her." A shadow crossed his face. "They both died in childbirth. No one would help them." "I'm sorry," Willow said softly. "It was 10 years ago now," Zach replied, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. "I was away, working a cattle drive. By the time I got back, it was too late. I've always wondered if things might have been different if someone had just shown them a bit of kindness." Understanding dawned on Willow. "So I'm your chance to make amends." Zach met her gaze directly. "You're not charity, Miss Adams. I'm offering you fair pay for honest work. The rest is just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Let's call it making peace with the past." Willow nodded slowly. Whatever his reasons, Zach Benton was offering her something no one else had a chance. "Then I accept," she said, "and please call me Willow." Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine. Willow cooked and kept the house, grateful for work that wasn't too taxing on her increasingly unwieldy body. Zach tended to the horses and the small herd of cattle he kept on the property, occasionally riding into town for supplies. The Outlaws didn't return, but Willow often thought about that moment when Zach had stood between her and danger, his voice steady as he'd said those words that had changed everything. "You'll answer to me now." One evening, as a rare summer storm brought welcome rain, they sat on the covered porch watching lightning flash across the distant mountains. Willow had come to enjoy these quiet moments when the day's work was done and a peaceful silence settled between them. "The baby's been active today," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I think he likes the sound of the rain." "He?" Zach asked, looking over at her. Willow smiled. "Or she? I don't know for certain, just a feeling." Zach nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My mother used to say she knew I was a boy because I kept her up all night kicking." "You don't talk about your family much," Willow observed gently. "Not much to tell," Zach replied, his gaze returning to the rain. "Parents died when I was 16. It was just me and my brother after that. We worked ranches together until he met Mary and settled down. I kept moving." He paused. "After they died, I bought this place. Needed somewhere to put down roots, I guess." "It's a lovely home," Willow said sincerely. "It's lonely sometimes," Zach admitted, surprising her with his candor. "Never thought I'd be the type to miss having folks around, but there it is." Willow understood loneliness all too well. Before coming to Copper Creek, she'd been a schoolteacher's assistant in Boston, orphaned early and raised by a distant aunt who died 2 years prior. When she discovered she was pregnant, the shame and rejection had been swift and absolute. The father of her child, a charming banker's son, had promised marriage only until the reality of their situation became inconvenient. "What about the baby's father?" Zach asked, as if reading her thoughts. Willow tensed, then sighed. She owed him the truth, at least. "He wasn't who I thought he was. When I told him about the baby, he disappeared, left Boston entirely from what I heard." "His loss," Zach said simply. Something in his tone made Willow look at him. The sincerity in his gray eyes caused a warmth to spread through her chest, a feeling she'd thought herself incapable of after all that had happened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for saying that, for everything." The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof and creating a curtain of water around the porch. Zach shifted in his chair, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I should check on the horses," he said, rising abruptly. "Make sure the barn roof isn't leaking." Willow watched him disappear into the rain, puzzled by his sudden departure. It wasn't until much later, lying in bed listening to the storm, that she recognized what had passed between them in that moment on the porch, a connection that went beyond gratitude and obligation. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. As her 8th month of pregnancy approached, Willow found herself increasingly aware of Zach's presence. The way his hands moved confidently as he worked with the horses, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. The gentleness with which he treated her, always asking if she needed to rest or if she was comfortable. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he would look away quickly, as if embarrassed to be caught. One morning, Willow was kneading dough for bread when a sharp pain caused her to gasp and double over, gripping the edge of the table. Zach burst through the door moments later, alerted by her cry. "Willow!" The alarm in his voice matched the fear rising within her. "It's too early," she gasped as another pain tore through her. "The baby isn't due for weeks." Zach was at her side instantly, supporting her weight as her knees threatened to give out. "I'm taking you to the doctor in town." "There isn't time," Willow said, panic edging into her voice as she felt a warm gush of fluid run down her legs. "The baby's coming now." Zach's face paled, but his voice remained steady. "Then we'll handle it here. Come on." He helped her to the bedroom, his arm firm around her waist. The pain was intensifying, coming in waves that left Willow breathless and terrified. "I'll ride for the midwife," Zach said once she was lying on the bed. Willow grabbed his hand. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, fear making her voice crack. "Please, Zach," he hesitated, clearly torn. "Willow, I don't know the first thing about delivering a baby." "Neither do I," she admitted, trying to smile despite the pain, "but I need you here." Another contraction gripped her, and she cried out, squeezing his hand until her knuckles turned white. When it passed, she saw determination replace the uncertainty in Zach's eyes. "All right," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "We'll do this together." The next hours were a blur of pain and fear for Willow. Zach brought water and clean towels, held her hand through each contraction, and spoke words of encouragement that somehow kept her anchored despite the pain threatening to pull her under. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he told her as she fought through another contraction. "You can do this, Willow." When the time came to push, Zach positioned himself at the foot of the bed, his face a mask of concentration despite the fear she knew he must be feeling. "I can see the head," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Just a little more, Willow." With one final, excruciating push, Willow felt the baby slide from her body. For a heart-stopping moment, there was silence. Then a tiny, indignant cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Zach announced, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful baby girl." He wrapped the infant in a clean towel and placed her on Willow's chest. Looking down at her daughter's red, scrunched face, Willow felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You're early, but you're perfect." She looked up to find Zach watching them, his expression soft with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she said, reaching for his hand. "I couldn't have done this without you." Zach squeezed her hand gently. "You did all the hard work." He paused, then added quietly, "She's beautiful, just like her mother." The days following the birth were a haze of exhaustion and joy for Willow. Zach rode into town to inform the doctor, who came to check on both mother and child, pronouncing them healthy despite the early arrival. "You're a lucky woman," the doctor told Willow. "Early births can be dangerous, especially without proper medical attention." He glanced at Zach. "You did well, Mr. Benton." Zach shrugged off the praise, but Willow could see the pride in his eyes as he looked at the tiny girl in her arms. "Have you decided on a name?" the doctor asked. Willow looked down at her daughter, then up at Zach. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope." As the weeks passed, Willow marveled at how naturally Zach took to having an infant in the house. He crafted a cradle from wood he'd been saving for fence repairs, lined it with the softest blanket he could find in town, and placed it beside Willow's bed. At night, when Hope cried, he would sometimes appear in the doorway, offering to walk with her so Willow could rest. The sight of the tall, rugged cowboy cradling her daughter with such tenderness never failed to make Willow's heart skip a beat. One evening, as Willow nursed Hope in the rocking chair by the window, she looked up to find Zach watching them from the doorway. "I should start looking for my own place soon," she said, voicing the thought that had been weighing on her mind. "We've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Zach's expression clouded. "You're not imposing, Willow. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." "That's kind of you, but we both know this was meant to be temporary." She swallowed hard. "I need to stand on my own feet for Hope's sake, and if I asked you to stay," Zach said quietly, "not as my housekeeper, but as—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle with his words. Willow's heart thundered in her chest. "As what, Zach?" He moved into the room, kneeling before the rocking chair so they were at eye level. "I never expected to feel this way again. After Mary and the baby died, I closed off that part of myself." His voice was low and earnest. "But you and Hope. You've reminded me what it's like to have a family, to not be alone." Hope finished nursing, and Willow adjusted her dress before gently shifting her daughter to her shoulder. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Willow Adams," Zach declared, his eyes never leaving hers. "Both of you. And if you'd consider it, I'd like to marry you, not out of obligation or pity, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears filled Willow's eyes. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Zach replied. "I know you're brave and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know you love your daughter fiercely. I know the sound of your laugh makes my day brighter." He took her free hand in his. "What else do I need to know?" Willow looked down at their joined hands, then at the baby sleeping peacefully on her shoulder. When she'd arrived in Copper Creek, alone and desperate, she could never have imagined finding not just safety but love. "Hope deserves a father who will love her as his own," she said softly. "She already has one," Zach assured her. "From the moment she was born, I've loved her as if she were mine." Willow searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity in his gray eyes. "And what about me? What if you wake up one day and regret binding yourself to someone else's child?" Zach shook his head. "The only regret I'd have is letting you walk away without telling you how I feel." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't expect an answer now. Take all the time you need." But Willow didn't need time. In that moment, with Hope in her arms and Zach kneeling before her, his heart laid bare, she knew with absolute certainty what she wanted. "Yes," she whispered. Zach blinked. "Yes." A smile broke across Willow's face. "Yes, I'll marry you, Zachariah Benton." The joy that transformed his features was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that held the promise of 1,000 more to come. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Copper Creek. The townspeople, who had once looked at Willow with judgment and disdain, now smiled and congratulated the new family. The outlaws who had terrorized her that fateful day were long gone, run out of the territory after attempting to rob the stagecoach. As Willow stood beside Zach, exchanging vows with Hope cradled in her arms, she marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few short months. From desperation to joy, from loneliness to love. 2 years later, on a warm spring morning, Willow stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Zach taught little Hope to feed a carrot to his gentle mare. The toddler's delighted giggle floated across the yard as the horse's velvety lips tickled her small palm. "Careful now," Zach cautioned, his hand protectively supporting Hope's back. Keep your hand flat, just like I showed you." Willow cradled her swollen belly, feeling the kick of the new life growing within her. A son, she was certain this time. In a few months, their family would grow again, a thought that filled her with contentment. "Mama, look," Hope called, her face alight with excitement. "Horse likes carrots." "I see, sweetheart," Willow called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Zach looked up, meeting Willow's eyes across the yard. The love in his gaze still had the power to take her breath away. He whispered something to Hope, who nodded eagerly, and they both started toward the house. "We have a surprise for you," Zach announced as they climbed the porch steps. Hope reached into the pocket of her pinafore and pulled out a slightly crushed wildflower. "For you, Mama," she said proudly. "Papa helped me find the prettiest one." Willow accepted the flower, bending carefully to kiss her daughter's cheek. "It's beautiful, thank you." Zach slipped his arm around her waist, his hand coming to rest on the swell of their unborn child. "How are you feeling today?" "Perfect," Willow replied honestly, leaning into his embrace. As the sun rose higher over the ranch they now shared, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate, pregnant woman mocked by outlaws to a beloved wife and mother with another child on the way. All because a cowboy had stepped forward in her darkest moment and said those words that had changed everything. "You'll answer to me now." In saving her, Zachariah Benton had found his own salvation. And in the home, they'd built together a home filled with love and laughter. They had both found the happiness they thought had passed them by. Hope tugged at Willow's skirts. "Story, Mama, about the brave cowboy," Willow smiled, exchanging a look with Zach. "Yes, my love. Let me tell you about the brave cowboy who saved a lady and her baby, and how they all lived happily ever after." And as Willow began the tale, their tale, she knew that happily ever after wasn't just a pretty ending to a story. It was what they lived every day in this home they'd built together on the wild frontier, where love had found them against all odds.